What's going on, guys? Today we're talking footwear. So we're going to be comparing barefoot and sock lifting to lifting in trainers and lifting in lifters. So a big question that I always get on my lifting shoe and training shoe reviews is that what type of shoe should I wear for this type of activity? So we're going to dive into the specifics of why different lifters and athletes will reach for different pairs of shoes for certain workouts and so forth. But I will say, before you watch this full video, if you're somebody who's just getting into training and working out, if you're somebody who is not that serious or specific with the way they lift, you are more than fine lifting in trainers. Don't overcomplicate the process. Your shoes are not going to make or break your training sessions. A good pair of trainers will last a while and they're going to be solid for you. But if you want to learn some more about the specifics, let's dive in to why lifters will lift either barefoot or with socks on. So whenever you see lifters training in socks or barefoot, usually it's in the compound movements. Very rarely do we see folks in normal gyms training fully barefoot through accessory movements. It's always for compound movements. And why is that? Well, let's look at it from a couple different angles. In the deadlift, what is something we do not necessarily want? One, we don't want a shoe that has a super big midsole where we're going to be feeling unstable at the ankle, but also two, we don't want to wear something with a heel where we're going to elevate our range of motion. So by training barefoot or in socks, you're basically getting flatter and more close to the ground, so you're going to limit some of that range of motion that you would have to pull if you were pulling off of a bigger midsole. Another reason for somebody who's let's say doing a low bar squat without shoes on, it might just be gripping the ground a little bit better with the foot, but also generally with the elevated heel and a low bar squat, some lifters can find it uncomfortable just because it makes the hip angle very sharp at the bottom. But that's going to be a case by case basis and that's not an all the time thing. But generally speaking, when you see lifters training barefoot or in socks, it's oftentimes to create the most amount of surface area you can with the foot and really grip the ground, and also limit range of motion in movements like the deadlift. Now let's talk about trainers. Trainers are kind of the best of all worlds. You can really do anything in trainers, and the only difference between a trainer and a lifting shoe is the elevated heel and the firmness of the outsole on the lifter, which we'll cover a little bit later. But most cross-training shoes will have a heel-to-toe drop. That means the difference between where the heel sits and the forefoot of the toe, around 2 to 4 to 8 millimeters. Generally 4 millimeters is what you're gonna see on the biggest named cross trainers. Now, what does that mean when it comes to lifting? Well, it means that you're gonna be relatively flat, and that's why cross trainers are often preferred by lifters, because you can really splay the toes well in them, they grip the floor really well, and generally they're a very stable model for a variety of lifts. So if you're squatting, deadlifting, doing some cleans, whatever it might be, generally trainers will be your best bet. And if you take a note on this video, barefoot and sock lifting is specific in nature. Trainers are a little bit of that best of all world, and then lifters are also specific. So we're kind of on a spectrum here when it comes to specificity and just what's the kind of norm when it comes to traditional training. So I don't probably need to keep reminding you why you wear trainers to work out in, but trainers will usually be kind of the best of all world shoe when it comes to slapping on a shoe on your foot for a workout and being able to tackle a variety of tasks. Now, let's talk about lifters, because I think that's probably the biggest question that you have when it comes to the 3 different shoes or 3 different types of footwear you can have when lifting. So lifting shoes have a very specific purpose, and that is to assist your stability and performance in various movements. Now specifically, generally lifters will wear these in the Olympic lifts and squats. You don't want to really wear them in deadlifts because again, the elevated heel is going to increase the range of motion that you have to pull weight. So what makes a lifting shoe a lifting shoe? Well, for starters, we have usually more supported midfoot materials here. So we have a strap on the Adidas AdiPower. We have a very firm outsole all throughout, and we have an elevated heel. Now, the combination of all of these features are going to put the foot into an already pronated position. Now, when it comes to squatting, what does that mean? So if we're already in a pronated position, usually it's a little bit easier for us to have dorsiflexion happen. So having those knees track forward, it helps us feel a little bit more stable, helps us have a more upright chest because we have something to sit back on. A big misconception when it comes to lifting shoes is that they increase dorsiflexion. That is not true. We're simply just putting the foot into a pronated position to begin with, which will feed a little bit easier into dorsiflexion during various exercises. So when lifters are training in these shoes, usually it's for a very sport specific reason, and that's often for stability in various movements like catching cleans in the hole or being more stable in the hole of a squat. while maintaining a good hip and torso angle, but usually you'll rock these for sport specific reasons or for squats if you're not necessarily a strength athlete, and that's generally it. You can wear lifters again for other movements, but the norm is usually the Olympic lifts and any other exercise that kind of feeds into that from a compound standpoint. So oftentimes this will be high bar squats, front squats. So hopefully that helps answer some questions behind why each type of footwear is worn for different activities by different lifters. Oftentimes I recommend that if you are just getting into training and you're not really focused on any specific type of activity, movement, sport, and so forth, trainers will be just fine. But there is some merit to having an elevated heel for a lot of lifters, especially beginners in this case too, who are trying to learn the fundamentals of letting the knees track in the squat, or who might feel like they have a little bit of a limited dorsiflexion and need some assist there. I consider footwear on a spectrum of specificity. Barefoot, sock lifting, that is done for a very specific reason. Trainers are usually kind of the middle ground between everything, where they are kind of the most versatile when it comes to just tackling a variety of tasks. And then lifters are also specific in nature for strength sports and various types of movements. If you have any other questions on this topic, drop them down below. I would love to answer and interact with you. And as always, guys, drop a like on the video, drop a subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next one.